What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And you're about to see why with the panel we have today. New York police, specifically out on Long Island, appear to have cracked a 13-year-old case. Accused Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann has appeared in court twice now. He was charged with the murder and the deaths of 3 of the 11 victims whose bodies piled up on Suffolk County's Gilgo Beach beginning in 2010. That is on the south shore of Long Island. And just last week, we covered a live press conference where one of the Jane Does was identified, Karen Vergata, 34 years old. The question is, had they ID her after all these years? Well, we've got someone here who's going to have the answer to that. And hint, her name starts with a K, Kristen from Othram. She is Kristen Mittelman. She is the Chief Development Officer of Othram Inc. It's a biometrics company using DNA sequencing and genomics to advance human identification. Dr. Mittelman received her Ph.D. in biochemistry and molecular biology from Baylor College of Medicine. And in 2021, Dr. Mittelman joined Othram to help bridge their life-changing technologies with the appropriate federal, state, and private funding opportunities in order to more quickly create a safer and more just world for all of us. So they are trying to get down to the bottom of IDing victims, related to crimes all around this country, and we'll get into that in a few moments. Lisa Ribikoff. I know her dad, and now I know her. She is the manager of International Investigative Group Limited. She is a private investigator. They have offices in New York City, Long Island, Westchester, Beverly Hills, Boca Raton, and London. And she currently serves on the board of directors for the American Polygraph Association and is president of New York State Polygraph Examiners Association. She's been on tons of TV shows, including MTV's Guy Code, VH1's Love and Hip Hop, the Rachel Ray Show. The list goes on, the Bill Cunningham Show, which I listen to occasionally on radio, Dr. Oz, and the rest. And then, last but not least, the man who looks like a seasoned attorney is one. That is Randy Zellen, New York-based former prosecutor turned criminal defense attorney with more than 30 years experience. He's tried cases against the DOJ and the SEC. He's also an adjunct professor at Cornell. You also see him on the television. He does tons of TV as well. Quick shout out to Dom's mom, who is watching, saying hello to the chief of everything, who is watching as well, as we dive into this. So there's actually news breaking on this today, which we'll get into, about the children and them wanting to rebuild the home, which is surprising, out on Massapequa, Long Island. So we'll talk about that. But as you all know, I like to always remember the victims, and Rex Heuermann's victims officially, per the police, are Amber Lynn Costello, 27, Melissa Barthelemy, 24, Megan Waterman, 22, and Rex Heuermann is the prime suspect, authorities say, in the fourth killing of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25. Collectively, they are known as the Gilgo Four, but there are at least 7 others that they're trying to get to the bottom of. There was a news conference, as I said, last week. Jane Doe number 7, a 34-year-old Manhattan sex worker, was identified. Kristen, for the lay people out there like myself, what is Othram? What do you guys do? Let's start there.
So Othram is the first lab in the US and the world that was purpose-built to take the most advanced genomic technologies out there and actually transform them to be able to work with forensic evidence. You heard back in 2018, 2017, people were starting to use genomic sequencing to get enough markers to be able to use genealogy databases to identify someone. And you saw some cases solved here or there, but a lot of cases were still remaining unsolved. Why didn't it work on every case that had DNA that didn't work with traditional forensic testing? And the reason is they were using assays that a lot of us here at Othram had actually built, but we purpose-built those assays for medical testing, or for consumer testing. David, our CEO here at Othram, was part of the first Human Genome Project, the 1,000 Human Genome Project, and he actually, with a team of people that are still here, helped build the standards that the FDA uses today to do this type of sequencing in medicine and to be able to give you like life or death decisions or diagnose what's going on. Unfortunately, when you go to the doctor and you give blood in a tube, that's very different than when you find bones, unidentified remains, as we're talking about in this case, out in a crime scene. It's single source DNA, it's fresh DNA, it's not contaminated with anything, it's not degraded, it's not broken up. The case we're talking about today, those bones were found scattered by a beach, and there is a whole bunch of contamination that occurs, degradation. There are all these other properties that you have to deal with before you can actually build a DNA profile that you can upload to these genealogical databases. And so Othram built a process called forensic grade genome sequencing. It is a whole genome sequencing approach, but it is not whole genome sequencing. It is completely purpose-built so that you can actually work with the most intractable evidence. And what we've been able to do and show, and you can see the velocity changing over the years here, is that these cases that were previously intractable because the DNA was too hard to work with, whether it was too old, whether it was too degraded, whether it was found in a sewage tank, so you couldn't get the contamination off, whether it was burnt, explosions, all the things you can imagine, we've now been able to build DNA profiles from and successfully identify the victims, which often leads to the identification of the perpetrator as well. As you know, it's very hard to work a crime if you have no idea who the person is. How do you figure out what they did the last few days of their lives, how they got there, who they were with? You can't start the investigation really until you start to know those details. And so when we help identify the victim, that starts that investigation as well. And with the perpetrator, we've been able to work with the lowest amount of DNA to date to identify a perpetrator. It was a case out of Las Vegas, a 14-year-old girl walking to school, raped and murdered in broad daylight. And we were able to take 0.12 picograms of DNA. It was a mixture of victim and perpetrator. That's the equivalent of about 15 human cells. If I touch my hand, I've left hundreds of cells. We took those 15 human cells from 32 years ago, and that was suffice for us to identify that perpetrator. And when his identity was entered into CODIS, it led to the confirmation of another crime 3 years before as well.
I'm going to have to circle back to fully understand that. Randy, I'm going to unmute you, but please, everyone, just keep yourselves muted because there's a funky audio glitch going on. But Randy, back to this this victim, this Jane Doe number 7. As I said, she's a 34-year-old Manhattan sex worker. There was a debate that came up in the last show. Do we call them sex workers or not? But it helps with investigators to know the type of victimology we're dealing with here. She disappeared 27 years ago. And thanks to Othram and Kristen Mittelman's company that she runs, along with others, they helped ID her. Obviously, from a human standpoint, this is hugely important because we now have a name to the face. But what does it do from a criminal defense standpoint or a legal standpoint for you, especially, I guess, for the county more so in the state, to make their case and to investigate this further?
Well, certainly each of the stakeholders, now knowing the identity of the victim here, are going to, if you're the prosecution, look to try to connect the dots from the victim to the defendant. If you are the defense here, obviously you want to do everything you can to keep those dots or hope that the evidence or the proof does not permit a connection of the dots. And in fact, probably the best thing that you can hope for from a defense standpoint, aside from not being able to link the victim to the defendant, what you want to try to do, and I think one of the things that's going to really be an issue for the prosecution in this case, is that the more it appears that there even could be more than one killer, that is going to immediately inject reasonable doubt into whether or not Mr. Heuermann should be convicted. And the reason why I say that, in the face of what appears to be mounting evidence against him, is that because the district attorney's office, because the way this case has been publicized as having been at the hands of one person, as soon as some doubt is planted as to whether or not it's more than one person, that is going to plant reasonable doubt. And what is reasonable doubt? Reasonable doubt is simply this. Anytime you have to make an important decision in your own life, if you need more information to schedule open heart surgery, you have reasonable doubt. Conversely, if you can say to the surgeon, schedule me up, let's go do this, you do not have a reasonable doubt. So again, to put a bow on all of this, to the extent that a potential juror is going to be sitting there thinking, hey, wait a minute, all this time I thought this was one guy was responsible for all of these murders. Now it may be more than one person. Well, that is where reasonable doubt begins to spring from.
I must unmute myself. So Estelle Pistorius joining us from Johannesburg in South Africa. I always love to see that. The global crew comes in when we go early, which I like to do on Wednesdays. And we've got the chief, I am not T-Pain, saying hi to the chief of everything, who's behind the scenes, taking care of us. Lisa, you're sort of the boots on the ground person. You've been on top of this investigation. You've got roots out on Long Island. What are you hearing about the investigation? Are you, from what you know so far, does it appear that Rex Heuermann could be the man? It seems like there's some mounting evidence against him.
Yeah, there's definitely mounting evidence, especially on the basis of the amount of discovery that's already been turned over and what was presented in the bail application, showing the geofencing and the triangulation of the cell phones, as well as possible vehicle records. Right now, I guess in general, we're all in a standstill because other than Jane Doe being identified last week as Karen, we're still waiting on the other identifications of other victims. And at the same time, we can't necessarily go ahead and say that these are victims of Rex, because again, there needs to be a link to their identities. And then, as Kristen mentioned, and what I would do actually as an investigator is go back and trace their last couple of days, especially the last day that they were seen, and then go ahead and create the timeline moving backwards as to where they were, who they associated with, and what was their current status at that time, financially, socially, emotionally, physically. But until we have something to go on pertaining to discovery, pertaining to victim identification, everything right now is at a standstill. And it does come down to the prosecutor and the defense attorney to go ahead and get their cases lined up to go to trial.
Kaz Loves Cakes joining us for the first time from Scotland. I'm going to get to I am not T-Pain's question in a second, but Kristen, back to you. I took notes during this press conference, which happened last Friday, but is still very pertinent today. Doe number 7, who we now know is Karen Vergata, 34. April 20th, 1996, her feet and legs are found. 15 years later, a skull is found in Nassau County following the discovery of both Jessica Taylor and a woman known as Peaches. 2 sets of remains. These legs were compared with the skull. And that is how the public was told. They sort of began to put this all together, along with some genetic genealogy and a buccal swab. Can you take us in like kind of inside baseball here? When they get these remains, how does it play out? And when do they come to you? And when do you get involved in meeting Othram, your company in Texas? Oh, sorry, you're got to unmute yourself. That's apologies.
I'm sorry. Absolutely. So when remains are found, usually what's done first is STR testing. That's when a lab looks, that's a traditional standard DNA testing that has been done in forensics for the last 30 years. They look at 20 markers and they compare those 20 markers to the known CODIS database owned by the FBI. If there's a hit, that's how you know that that person was in that perpetrator database before. Unfortunately, when you're looking for victims, you usually don't get a hit in the CODIS database. In this case, that's how they connected the legs found initially to the skull that was found in a different location later on. That there was a match between those two parts when it went into CODIS, even though there was no identity confirmed. That's when they come to us. When there's no identity and you can't tell who the person is, it's a DNA dead end when it comes to traditional forensic testing, they contact Othram and they say, can you help us build a profile that has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers? The reason you need hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers and not just 20 or 1,000 or a small amount of markers is because the more markers you have, the more distant relationships you can detect when you upload to a genealogical database. And so you can detect 6 cousins, 5th cousins, 4th cousins. You can detect all the relationships that are in these genealogical databases consented for law enforcement use, which allows you to then piece back where this person belongs on a family tree. And that's exactly what we do here at Othram. The remains were sent to us. We extracted DNA. We proceeded to do our feasibility analysis and knew that we could build one of these profiles. So before we move on and consume evidence or consume law enforcement budgets, we guarantee that we can build a profile. Then we move on, build this profile that has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers. And in this case, we were working with the FBI already. So we turned over the profile to the FBI New York office, and they did the genealogy and were able to identify the family that she belonged in. Investigators then contact the family and ask, are you missing someone? In this case, they were. The father was missing his daughter, and he had been looking for his daughter for a very, very long time. So then they ask, will you be willing to provide a DNA sample so that we can confirm that this is your daughter? And they did provide a DNA sample. The confirmation test was done. It confirmed that it was her for sure. Karen got her name back, and her family was able to know where she was. You know, when you lose somebody, I've met so many families, hundreds of families over the last couple of years, and being able to make these identifications, their life stops there. They start to look for that person every day. They hire investigators. They go back to the last place where they saw them. They live in the same home, hoping that someone will come back and knock on the door and tell them where their loved one is. They don't change cell phone numbers. You can't move on without knowing the truth. And nobody wants to find out that this is what happened to their loved one. But the truth is necessary in order to be able to turn that page to the next chapter and get justice for this person as well.
And the name Othram, I'm just curious, it sounds straight out of a science fiction movie. Where's the name come from?
It is out of a science fiction movie. It is from Lord of the Rings, and it's the wall that protects the city. And early on, the concept behind what we do is trying to protect society by identifying perpetrators the first time they commit a crime, and making sure that every victim out there gets their name back and their story told. No one should have to go 30, 40 years, 100 years without having their story pieced back to reality.
100%. Randy, I'm coming back to you in a second, but first to Lisa from I Am Not T-Pain. Do you think Karen Vergata will be named as one of Rex's early victims, or do you think there isn't enough to connect them to her death because it happened so many years ago in the 90s, Lisa?
My personal opinion, and again, this is outside of everything, is that we need to go back and take a look at her lifestyle, her interactions. Now that we know who she is, go back and reverse the timeline, see who she's associated with. We do know that she did have a criminal history, possibly look into that, look into affiliated partners, how long has she been working, residences, things like that, and just pretty much hit the ground and hit the pavement to do these interviews. So that way we can kind of timeline, because at the same time, we also now have to speak with the prosecutor. And can the prosecutor go ahead and have his client provide somewhat of an alibi as to where he was during that specific time? If we can go ahead and set the timeline of when she was missing to obviously when her remains were found. There's speculation going around because the manner of which the deceased was located and the fact that she was in multiple pieces scattered in multiple areas, that again, the speculation is that there could possibly be another killer out there, which has not been discussed too much, but considering the basis of the MO of the Gilgo 4 versus the other victims being completely different, that is another avenue that does have to be explored.
And Randy, I was the one that was muting you. I'll unmute you in just a moment because there's a funky glitch. But Julie Frew saying hello from the UK. And then I got to say hi to NJ Coolchick, my home state of New Jersey. And look at this. Jory is in Chicago here. So there you go. Jory in Chicago. So Randy, to you, the district attorney out on Long Island wants a buccal swab of Rex Heuermann, and now the attorney representing him is saying not so fast. Danielle Coyce is one of the attorneys representing the triple murder suspect, and said that the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office is, quote unquote, a far cry from the legal benchmark that would force the architect, meaning Rex Heuermann, to provide the swab. What is going on here? If he's innocent, you'd think he'd say, take my DNA, but the defense attorney is saying no way.
See, there you go, shifting the burden of proof. Mr. Heuermann is presumed to be innocent. He need prove nothing. He need do nothing. He can sit there throughout his trial and read the New York Times. He could, if he could bring a computer into the courtroom, watch Surviving the Survivor, and none of that could be used against him. And that to me has always been my practical problem with the entire system, because that is human nature. Human nature is such where we expect someone who hasn't done anything wrong to say so. As parents, if we had reason to believe that our child came home late and broke curfew, and the next morning I said, hey, Nico, what time did you get home last night? And he looked at me and said, I don't have to answer you. What would I do? I would presume that he in fact broke curfew and I would punish him. But the criminal justice system, where we say to jurors, bring us nothing but your common sense and everyday life experience, the presumption of innocence flies against common sense. But to your point, what happens is, as a defense attorney, I want to zealously represent my client. I want to be Dr. No, even if I don't really need to be Dr. No. The truth of the matter is, a court is going to order that swab. But the defense attorney doesn't want to be perceived as giving in. It's bad optics. It's bad client management. The truth is, the case law is clear. The case law says DA's got to prove three things: probable cause, reasonable likelihood that you will find evidence, and that the method of doing the testing is not intrusive. Well, for defense counsel to get up there and say, there's no probable cause here, defense counsel forgot one thing. Mr. Heuermann's been indicted. When you are indicted, at that point, it is the grand jury who has spoken and said, yes, we believe that there's probable cause, because that is the test to get an indictment. So the court will say, box one checked off, probable cause. Two, DA will say, well, it is reasonable, judge, to believe that we are going to find relevant evidence based upon doing this comparison, because we have and we need. Box two will be checked off. And three, it's a swab of the inside of his cheek. It's not intrusive. No one's going to get hurt. Box three checked off. Now, where it does get tricky what can the DA's office use with this sample? Well, the point is what they can't do with it. He hasn't been convicted. Therefore, it can't go anyplace else other than to the medical examiner, for the medical examiner, excuse me, to do a comparison. And as long as the DA's office says, Your Honor, we're not uploading it to any state, any national database, he's presumed innocent, all we want to do is take the sample, do a comparison, and it's going to go into the database of the medical examiner. Nothing more than that. Application's going to be granted.
I have to unmute myself. Sorry about that. I figured you would say that. And kind of a side note, we have Detective Phil Waters, who's investigated over 400 homicide cases for the Houston PD. He comes on every Friday. And I said to Phil Waters, I said, what if the court does order this buccal swab and Rex Heuermann, all 6'6" of them, sits there and refuses to open his mouth? And Phil Waters said, don't worry, we'll get the sample. So one way or another, if the court orders it, they are going to get the sample. Lisa, back to you. So the back and forth between the defense team and prosecutors focused really on the authorities' evidence of pizza crust, a napkin that was tossed in the garbage that they alleged tied Rex Heuermann to one of the slangs. This is the quote again from the attorney, the defense attorney, about this DNA request. The attorney, she says, the assertions contained in the People's Moving Papers might be construed as rising to the level of a reasonable suspicion, but that is a far cry from the standard of probable cause required to justify granting the order sought by the people. You see Randy with piles of paper. He's probably writing some similar motions to the court. But Lisa, are you surprised at all? Are you surprised at all that they're refusing at this point to give this DNA swab till the court officially orders it?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. I don't know defense counsel directly, but I know of him through my work with Suffolk County's 18B panel, which is the appointed counsel panel. And I do that for Nassau and Suffolk, as well as all 5 boroughs here in the city. So reputation supersede, and as well as you can go online and do research pertaining to counsel. I saw him at the press conference. I'll tell you, he's smart, he's knowledgeable, he's tough, and he's aggressive. So the fact that he's going to toe-to-toe pretty much with the prosecutor right now, explaining that he's not going to have his client consent to it, I completely understand. If I was defense counsel, I would also. However, the other flip of the coin is the fact that, I mean, the general public, we kind of get the perception of, if your client is innocent, why would you not go ahead and want to just provide the sample right off the bat and go ahead and just clear your client right away? It's the same thing. The reason why I give a polygraph exam, it's there to go ahead and clear the innocent. We're not there to go ahead and just track down the guilty. It's there to clear the innocent. And if your client can go ahead and provide a sample to go ahead and clear him and to vindicate pretty much his current reputation and status in the world, why not go ahead and do it?
Yeah, and Randy made a good point. I mean, it's optics, it's how it looks, but he is 100% presumed innocent in a court of law, and maybe he should sit there and watch Surviving the Survivor in court. It'd be good for the show, I'll tell you that. Got to say hi to Dragon Claws, STS family, New Jersey here. Forget about it. There's my Jersey hat. You can kind of see it. Kristen, back to you. You got, this begs the question. We still don't have the ID of this toddler, as well as this Asian man. Do you believe we will get that in time? Do you think we will find out? Will we have a name for both those faces?
So we can't discuss cases prior to them being announced by law enforcement. What I can tell you is where there is DNA, and with unidentified remains, thankfully there is DNA. This technology is capable of identifying almost everyone. And so I would say keep watching, but we work closely with the FBI. We have for years, and I would just keep watching and see what comes up.
Unless you think we are not a global show, you got Andrea in Germany. You have Lig Du Dull, if I'm saying that right, in London. And you've got Janet Murphy echoing everyone's sentiments. Great guest. It is not just a tagline. It is a way of life at STS. We bring you the best guests in true crime. Jennifer, welcoming all in. I'm curious, Kristen, how many cases, I know you can't, name specifically, but how many cases do you guys work on simultaneously? And is it just cases in America? Are you working cases in foreign countries as well?
So we work international cases as well. In fact, I was working on one right before I logged in this morning. But we have worked all over Europe now, Australia, we have Canada and the US. And we've provided back over 1,200 identifications so far. There's 200 publicly announced ones that you can see on, if you go to recent casework on Othram.com, and you can read every victim story. We never put a picture of the perpetrator. So whether we identified the perpetrator or the victim, we always put the picture of the victim and we tell their story and exactly what part we played in the investigation and piece them back to reality. So I would encourage people to go read those stories, share them, share the ones that are near you so law enforcement knows what's possible. I do believe that this technology is the beginning of a new forensic era where people don't have to wait decades to identify these victims or to catch these perpetrators. And I do think that cold cases are going to start converging to extinction as this technology starts to be used more and more and more.
And there's a fascinating article in the New York Times I'm going to bring up in a few minutes. I know Randy Zellen has got to be all over the New York Times every day, so we're going to get to that in a second. But first, Randy, Jeanette Howard says, hi from the UK. Do you think they'll keep charging him if they have evidence on other murders, or will they not use taxpayers' money to carry on once he's charged? This question always comes up. What do you say from your legal perspective?
Well, I think from a purely legal perspective, not wearing a defense hat, not really wearing any hat, the pursuit of justice is not tied to what it costs. We see this even to the point where you say as a defense attorney, hey, why are you doing this? I think the classic example is, for example, in the Alex Murdaugh case. How many times do you have to keep charging him? He's already serving 1 billion years in jail. Does he have to serve 1 trillion years in jail? And the point is, and I think people may be surprised to hear the mean, crusty, cold, uncaring defense attorneys say, well, listen, it's important for the family. It's important for the families. It's important for the community to know that justice has been done. A conviction, a trial is a way of bringing about closure. So from that perspective, yes, taxpayers be damned, budgets be damned. A prosecutor, if I have evidence to bring a case, I do not care if this defendant is already sentenced to 5 million years. Again, look at Harvey Weinstein. How many times does Harvey Weinstein have to be convicted? And yes, I understand, well, there could be an appeal. He could have a conviction thrown out. Then he could be walking the street. But the point is, it really is as much about justice and closure and giving the victims' families a sense of we care and we are going to bring you the justice that you deserve.
And if you think Randy Zellen is cold and callous, he's not. He has a warm heart, and he's always talking about the victims, as you can see right here. Simply Lure, hello from Belgium. I love it. Straight from Belgium to Toronto. And then we've got the UK. So every time we do these 12:30 shows, which I will definitely do once a week, look at this. We've got UK, England. They all pop in. And then Felicia says, Othram's from Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas. Woo, love it. So there you go. So this article I was talking about from the New York Times, I happened to catch it. The headline is Twilight of the Serial Killer. Cases like Gilgo Beach become rarer. And it says that techniques that led to the arrest of Mr. Rex Heuermann, who has pleaded not guilty to the crimes, are helping to explain the waning of serial killing, which the FBI now defines as the same person killing 2 or more victims in separate events at different times. Again, killing 2 or more victims in separate events at different times. That's how the FBI defines serial killers. But this article implies that it is harder to hide now because of the amount of technology. Lisa Ribicoff, do you think we're going to see a day soon, which Kristen just alluded to, where we almost force serial killers underground because it's going to be impossible not to get caught?
Hopefully we're not forcing them underground because they know they're going to get caught and they shouldn't be doing it anyway, but that's besides the point. I think that for those that are out there, I mean, we only hear about the ones that make the media, but there are plenty out there. I mean, to take a look at the population in New York alone, we have one alleged one right now, but hypothetically speaking, if we have other victims and they are who's been taglined as the Manorville Butcher, that's an alleged second one. We don't know what else is going on, possibly in cases that are taking place in Brooklyn. There's a lot of missing women and the media is making the speculation that those are also victims of either one of these two alleged killers. But again, population density, we don't know how many are in the country right now or how many have offended that we don't even actually know about. But forcing them underground, I feel that, I don't know if that's the right terminology to force them underground. That yes, there is a possibility of preventing crime because forensics are so high and the capability of being caught is so high. So hopefully that acts as a deterrent. But I think from someone choosing to offend, that comes down to their own psychological profile, in addition to their own socialization, and that we can't prevent anyone from doing anything. Every individual is given the tools and capabilities to go ahead and act accordingly. And it's just up to that individual. So is forensics going to be a preventative measure from them doing it? I don't necessarily believe so, because again, it does come down to social, emotional, and psychology that I do feel that it overrides not the importance of forensics, but I do feel that it's just innate in someone.
And Lisa, just, what's when this story broke, I mean, was everyone in New York City talking about this? New Yorkers are generally kind of immune to a lot because they see everything. But I mean, I don't know if you're out on Long Island or living in Manhattan right now, but what was the buzz like when the story first broke in the city?
So I actually live on Long Island. Door to door from my house to Gilgo is 27 minutes. It is when it first came out, there was a couple of different aspects. It was every choice of profanity and colorful language of excitement. I'm not going to drop any bombs, I promise, but colorful language and descriptive language of the excitement of the fact that he was caught, because there was no longer the fear of a woman being out in public alone, especially given the fact that reports have come out that he was accosting women up until the week before in Massapequa Park. So he was still out and about. And again, it's all allegedly that he has gone ahead and he is the offender for these crimes. I think that's a big thing that we have to remember is talking, not even just amongst us, but just the generalization of the population, that he has not been found guilty. He's still alleged, doesn't matter how much research, doesn't matter how much evidence, it's still allegedly that he had done that. And it's up to his defense attorney to prove that he did not. But going back to just like the fear in general, there was an elatement that someone had been caught and that the prosecutor's attempting to deem him responsible. The other side of it is, okay, well, now that this has happened, what do we do moving forward as a community? It did stretch all the way to New York City. I'm currently in my New York City office right now, and it definitely was talk amongst my office here for people that did live in the city. Because again, there's still missing persons throughout the tri-state area. There's still missing persons throughout the United States. We know just from doing research that Mr. Heuermann did travel extensively throughout the tri-state area and throughout the country, as well as going as so far to having a hunting permit in Alaska. So there is a concern just for the world population now, or even just national, pretty much within the United States, that people know that he has ties to different communities. And now it's becoming a scattered race of, oh, we have a missing individual here, and we have one here, and we have one here. I do appreciate law enforcement taking the role of jumping back into their cold cases, kind of seeing this as a predictive behavior of trying to see if it is tied to him in any capacity. But finding an individual or locating an individual that is allegedly responsible for a case like this should not be the reason why cold case investigators throughout the country are reopening their files.
By the way, I'm excited to meet Lisa in person at CrimeCon 2023, September 22nd in Orlando. We're going to be doing lives from there. People coming in person. the COE, the chief of everything, ordered some fun swag for people. So excited to get that out to everybody. Jennifer Duncan made a live. I'm from Scotland, usually asleep when your show goes out. Love your channel. I look forward to watching you all the time. I will excuse you for not staying up late. And then look at this from Rick. STS is the best. That's because we've got the best guests. Moving on with this article here from the New York Times. Here's a paragraph from it. The amount of data, Kristen, that people create in their daily lives is more than many can conceptualize. Just by walking outside, people are now tracked by ever-present cameras, from Amazon Ring units outside homes to surveillance at banks and retail stores. Every use of a phone or computer creates streams of data that are collected directly on devices or immortalized on servers. Aside from DNA, this digital forensics, Kristen, are all of is all of this technology now squeezing not just serial killers but criminals in general? Is it making their business much tougher? Technology gets a bad rap in the sense that kids are addicted to it. I've got plenty of issues with it, but in terms of catching criminals, is it proven to be very successful?
So I think that some technologies are. I do believe that technology needs to bring certainty to an investigation. And a lot of the technologies out there can be used to finally corroborate what's going on when you actually know what happened, but can't bring certainty initially, right? What I love about DNA, especially when you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers, is that it can be no one else. Once that DNA test comes in and you identify that one person, that's it. That's that person. And then they left DNA at that crime scene, whether they were the victim or the perpetrator or someone that was at the crime scene for whatever reason. But it allows investigators to exclude all these other possibilities. Every time we identify a perpetrator, we're actually removing doubt from a whole bunch of people that were suspects and changing their lives as well, because not being able to bring that certainty, that suspicion would have remained and followed them and their families for years to come. We've solved so many cases where people were the lead suspect for decades, or people were even incarcerated for a crime they didn't commit. And so being able to bring that certainty to an investigation is huge. And then being able to use all these other biometrics that are out there to corroborate the story, that's incredible. I wouldn't want to use technology where, you're identifying someone that could look like a whole bunch of people. To me, that brings uncertainty to the investigation. But that's my personal bias, because I've gotten to see and I've gotten to meet so many people that were under suspicion and it wasn't them. I think that you have to consider both sides, and I think you should use the tools that bring the most certainty to the investigation.
Well said. Randy Zellen, you were kind enough to join last minute, and now I'll put you on the spot for that because I am relentless here. So there is a serial killer database run by Radford University and the Florida Gulf Coast University. Do you care to guess how many active or known serial killers there were in 1987 compared to today? You have a number. How many do you think there were in 87?
I would not for 1 second look to embarrass myself in front of your viewers by throwing out a number where I have absolutely no basis whatsoever. So I refuse, and I decline to answer that on the grounds that my answers might not tend to incriminate me as much as they might tend to make me look very silly and never be invited back on your show. So I ain't answering. I have no idea.
If I ever get in trouble, I'm definitely, Randy is my number one right now. 1987, there were 198 known active serial killers in the United States. In 2018, there were only 12 known serial killers and 44 victims, according to this database. Randy Zellen, this New York Times article, do you think it's in fact accurate that the advent of technology is now making it much harder to commit crimes, specifically serial killings?
That is a very difficult question to answer, but I'm not going to leave you all hanging. Here's the reason. First of all, there are a couple of variables, and there really is no one size fits all answer here. First of all, you have to look at what deterrence is supposed to do. And in fact, one of the things where I most often find myself in difficulty at a sentencing hearing is talking about deterrence, where a judge wants to send a message to the next Randy Zellen criminal that if you commit this crime, you're going to go to jail. And somehow that's supposed to deter the next Randy Zellen from committing a crime. My argument is always, but wait a second, Judge. First of all, the studies show that it's not the fear of a sentence that deters people. It's the fear of getting caught. And by the way, unless it's a high-profile case, no one's going to know. So this notion of deterrence, and you have got to send my client to jail to send a message to the next defendant, it really isn't fair and it really doesn't work. But I think Lisa actually made a really good point, which is deterrence and this notion of you're going to get caught only works for someone who has an appreciation of what he or she is doing, and what he or she is doing is wrong. So let's assume for the moment that no rational person, no person whose neurons and whatever synapses are all firing appropriately, no rational person would commit a crime, let alone kill people, let alone kill lots of people, and basically do it the same way. So assuming that that person is missing something, the elevator is not going up all the way and is not getting to all of the floors, there is no deterrence. There is no technology. There is nothing out there that's going to stop me if somewhere along the way I either can't help what I'm doing, I don't care to help what I'm doing, or I can't stop myself, or I can't appreciate that what I'm doing is wrong. So perhaps for the garden variety criminal, the fact that we have 24/7 news cycle, the fact that you can't walk outside and walk down the block without being on someone's camera, the fact, again, as Lisa said, that we can track you by your cell phone, we can track you by your computer, we have the ability to find you in ways you don't even know. It used to be, it was just mind-blowing when the government went and subpoenaed E-ZPass records so we could see how I traveled. Did I travel from one borough to another? Did I cross over state lines? And that initially was jaw-dropping, but now you can't go, believe me, you can't go. Someone knows right now that I'm on this podcast. And in fact, a lot of people know that I'm on this podcast. So you can't escape the technology. But when we're talking about stopping a serial killer, I think that presupposes that a serial killer can understand that I shouldn't be doing this.
You're muted.
Joel, you're muted.
Look at that. I keep muting
There we
myself. We've got a weird audio glitch, and I'm the worst at unmuting, but Ski Hat Sarah, if she was here, would be making fun of me because this happens at least once a show. So it wouldn't be a show without me forgetting to unmute myself.
I'll hold up a sign for you.
I am not T-Pain for Kristen here. How reliable is genealogical DNA, and is it used a lot in trials? Do juries find it reliable? And have they found people guilty based on this kind of DNA testing? I can tell you the first time I really heard of it was with the Golden State Killer and Barbara Ray Venter, which is fairly recently. We've had her on a few times, but Kristen, your response?
Yeah, it's absolutely reliable. Actually, Othram has gone to court. We were the first to actually go to court. It was here in Texas for the Carla Walker trial on actually putting the technology in front of a jury. Texas is a show-me-all state. Not all states are. And as I told you, this technology is bookended with and confirmed with traditional STR testing. And so a lot of times that's enough. The traditional forensic testing is enough to say, look, we excluded everyone else. It's this person. So they don't put the genealogical DNA testing onto the trial, but they did here in Texas. It was a capital murder trial, and Glenn McCurley was sentenced to life in prison. And there are several other cases. We're actually part of a lot of contemporary cases here recently as well. They're all in trial right now. And I actually I want to circle back, and I agree with what Lisa and Randy both said. You can't stop a serial killer initially from committing the crime because, like you said, they're wired that way. But you can, if you can identify that serial killer the first time they commit a crime, because this technology is used in every case. We have worked many contemporary cases right now, some of which are high profile, and you guys will hear about soon in the news, where we've identified that perpetrator the first time, and they had a list of other victims that they were going to attack next. And those victims at least went on and are going to live a normal life, and are never going to be affected by crime the way that the victims before, the victim that they actually, we identified them for, had to experience. And so for me, I feel like you can't stop them, but you can catch them right away and not allow them to go to the second, third, fourth, or 12th crime.
And Kristen, I want to come back to you from Dom's mom here. How long do you foresee it taking? There's an interesting question within here, I think. How long do you foresee it taking before we know who all the victims are and whether they're connected to Rex Heuermann or not? My question to you, is there a rough timetable on how long it takes to identify someone in general? Broadly speaking, can you say from the time we get, DNA sample, it generally takes us 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? What's it like time-wise?
If it's a cold case, and we're identifying someone, it usually takes us about 6 weeks from the time we get a DNA sample to build one of these profiles. But almost all of our identifications are done within a period of a few months, 3 months. If it's a contemporary case that we're working, we've identified perpetrators in a matter of 2 days. So the technology is rather quick if it has to be. And if we know someone's out there attacking the next person, we'll immediately identify as fast as we can and help law enforcement stop that person before they commit the next crime.
And do you have a forensic scientist that is literally sitting in front of a computer? My question is, does the computer sort of do the majority of the work, or is a forensic scientist sitting there and inputting data? How does all that transpire?
So we have both, right? We have a lab that is unlike any other lab in the world. It looks like an ancient DNA lab, forensic lab, and intertwined with a genomics lab. And I think what's allowed us to be able to build this technology so quickly is that we do everything in-house, from the wet lab work all the way through the computational work that you're talking about. We have an entire team of software engineers and big data software players that are able to take the information that you're getting from this really difficult to look at DNA and make it look like a profile that you can upload to a genealogical database and can compare to fresh DNA that is in there from someone's mouth swab or from someone's blood test, right? And so we have both of those people on our team. We also have the genealogists on our team. We have an incredible genealogy team that then builds these genealogical trees, looks at all the matches, and helps you identify either the victim or the perpetrator. We have engineers that are working on deploying this type of equipment to all the state labs so that everyone can use this technology. There's no way that Othram alone can solve 350,000 cold cases in the United States alone. Forget the rest of the world, right? Everyone's going to have to start being able to use this equipment and build these profiles, use the software that we've built and upload it into databases so that you can get these answers and can identify everyone. But we are doing all of that. We've been able to do everything in-house, which allowed every case, every one of these over 1,000 cases that I told you about that had solved became a truth set, a standard that we can go back to every time we get DNA and say, we've done this before and we know exactly how we've done it with these properties of DNA. So then we can do it in a day or two. It doesn't have to there's no trial and error because you're comparing it. That's exactly how it works in medicine. You have those standards and then you compare every sample back to the standard. We built those standards for forensics. And for the first time, this technology is robust, it's predictable, and it's scalable. And that's what was missing prior to Othram coming in. You're right. People were working cases, like you said, and some worked here or there. But every part of the investigation, every part of the DNA testing, the computational work, the genealogy was done separately. and not united one to the other. And so you couldn't really build that truth set. You couldn't really make the technology better. You couldn't start to incorporate inputs that otherwise wouldn't have worked because you couldn't see where it was failing. And that's what's changed. And that's what in 2019, I think we announced 5 cases. Now we're solving 5 cases a day and announcing at least once a day. And so it's the scale has changed. Law enforcement trusts it for the first time. They used to give us only the most impossible cases, last chance attempt. Now they call us as soon as that STR test fails and says, help us get that perpetrator, or they're uploading all of their unidentified remains, all of their cold cases into our database up front and saying, help us solve as many as you can. It's changing, and I do think it's going to make a huge difference in what we see in the numbers of crimes that are out there. But most of all, it's going to give answers to these victims that have been waiting for so long. I've met victims that told me they haven't slept in 30 plus years. And finally, the perpetrator is behind bars for the first time and they feel safe. I've met victims' families that went back to the crime scene every week, hoping that the perpetrator would come back to relive it so they could confront them because they felt like there was no more hope. Now there's hope. There's true hope to go back to all those cases and bring closure and bring answers. And I know closure is a polar word, and I don't think that you can take back anything that has happened to these people, but the truth is necessary. It's necessary. They need it. They seek it every single day. And justice, like Randy said earlier, that every single case matters. These victims, they deserve that they get justice for what happened to them, regardless of how many other people it happened to, regardless if that perpetrator's in jail forever. They deserve their chance to get to look that person in the eyes and find out what happened to them or their loved one and why, and get to have that little piece of truth so they can move forward.
Powerful and very true. And I'm going to be presumptuous and say I got to get an invite to come down. I want to check out Othram, so I'm going to have to do that.
I want you to come. CrimeCon's going to have a media day here at Othram right after CrimeCon, so I hope you come as part of that or come anytime. We'd love to show you.
Cool. Maybe we'll do some shows from there. Janet Murphy says, Othram, very cool. Followed by this comment from Bob T. Going to go to you, Lisa, on this, and I'm going to give you some data to go along with it. I don't understand why everyone expects these to be connected. Remember, there are 11 sets of human remains. There are millions of people in New York, more than one killer out there at any moment. The New York Post just ran a story I'm not sure, to be honest, if it was the Post. It may have been a paper out on Long Island, now that I'm thinking about it. But it was the disappearance of a 12-year-old girl back in 1991. She was in junior high. Rex Heuermann would have been a 27-year-old architect apprentice living not far away. This young woman, girl, I should say, not a woman, 12 years old, lived, I'm looking for the street here. I want to say there it is, 689 Hart Street. And Rex Heuermann filed a request to do work on a Hart Street. This little girl was never found. And then 2 weeks later, back in 1991, a woman named Sandra Acosta, her body parts were found, hands, feet, arms, and legs, along with her head, but her torso, not to be too macabre, was never found. Lisa, you mentioned this earlier, but police have their work cut out. Investigators have their work cut out trying to connect these cases. Do you think they need to go all the way back to 1991? Is there a possibility that Rex Heuermann could be behind this? He was in the area, literally on the same street as this young girl.
Just because he was in the vicinity doesn't mean that he actually did it. We have to take into account the fact that studies and research have been done that serial killers just don't decide randomly in their 40s to go ahead and start killing. And that typically the age bracket when they do start offending is between the ages of approximately 23 to 28. So that he does fit just on the age, but you can't go on the basis of age and location. There's got to be extenuating factors. And it does come down to also, again, if they want to go that far back, they can. They would have to interview witnesses. They would have to go ahead and sue good family members. They'd have to go back and figure out why he was in the neighborhood to begin with. What type of work was he doing? I'm not saying that they shouldn't do that. I do think that what they need to first do is focus on the investigation that's currently being had, because we do have victims that are allegedly of him. I think that this needs to be done as a global approach, but you do need to start small. Focus on what the evidence is stating that he had allegedly done, and then from there, work your way outwards. Because again, if he is convicted, and Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, if he is convicted, then based upon penal law, his sample would then be able to go ahead and be put into CODIS. Is that correct? I see the head nods. That's awesome. Okay. So once the DNA sample, if he is convicted, and again, the big word is if he is convicted, then the DNA sample goes into CODIS. And then from there, CODIS, these other open cases, the cold cases, the investigators, the law enforcement agencies, whether it's local, state, or federal, can then go ahead and run whatever samples that they have against CODIS. And that way you can then go ahead and determine if there is a match and if he is responsible for anything else. However, as Kristen mentioned, if there are only remains, we have to go ahead and develop the DNA profile, go ahead and put a name to the victim. And I've publicly said the past couple of days, but even months, even before, I've connected publicly through Othram and through social media channels, is that what Othram is doing is something that no one has A, done before, but B, I like to use the analogy of not only did Othram change the game, but you guys wrote the playbook. You have completely set the standards for the industry. You are giving a name and a voice to a victim that no longer has one. I don't like using the word closure because at this point, when families or loved ones lose a victim due to a crime, you don't always have that closure. You're not going to have that sense of security that they're coming back, that they're physically going to be there. You have to handle with the emotional trauma. And sometimes it's something that never goes away. So I don't like using the closure, but you're allowing them to pursue justice. So just a separate thank you on my behalf to Kristen and your team. It is unbelievable what you guys do. And I just want to say thank you.
You're going to make me cry. Thank you.
Kudos. It is important work. Abby Taha, friend of the show. Hello from Kansas. Great group here today. Tali watching in Israel, where my beloved mother just became a great grandmother and is there. Sissy, hello from Brazil. I love doing these earlier shows because you get the whole world watching. Randy, I'm going to unmute you in 1 second, but Luz Carrion, she is this woman's sister, the one who's Sandra Acosta's sister, whose body parts sadly washed ashore in 91. Back in 1991, her sister, a woman named Luz Carrion, said, somebody set out to do this, not only to her, but other people, because there's a lot of young girls missing, about 3 others. Same color hair, about the same height, weight, same area. The other girl is 3 blocks away from here. Luz Carrion referred to the missing. She was referring to this 12-year-old girl who went missing, is what I am trying to say. But Randy, if you are defending Rex Heuermann, and you are one of the best criminal defense minds, the optics don't look good. He was in the neighborhood. He was right there. You've got the court of public opinion, screaming out, public pressure. How do you handle this as other cases from the past begin to pop up with him in close proximity?
Well, there is the practical decision that needs to be made as to whether or not you will take the bait as a defense attorney and try the case in the media, which presents its own set of problems, which is it creates the distraction professionally where you should be working up the case. You are trying the case in the media. You may be giving away strategies that, quite frankly, you want to save for the courtroom. There's also the ethics of a lawyer not being able to speak publicly and, in fact, potentially taint or infect or otherwise put information in the minds of a potential juror where that information does not belong in the mind of a potential juror. But certainly you have to balance what I just said against the fact that the district attorney's office is up on a soapbox, trying the case in the court of public opinion under the guise of, oh, we're just trying to get the word out so other people will come forward and maybe we can find additional evidence. That's a soundbite. What a prosecutor is doing is making sure that there ain't a juror who walks into the courtroom who doesn't already have a preconceived notion, the same way you just said. Isn't that damning? Well, to Lisa's point, okay, great. So I was in the neighborhood. I live in Manhattan. Does that mean because I'm in Manhattan, I should be a suspect in every crime that takes place in Manhattan? If a crime takes place on my block, am I a suspect because I live on the block? That certainly isn't enough evidence to convict, but does it, allow you to start connecting the dots? Absolutely, but you have to listen. As a defense attorney, we take the hand that we are dealt with. We play the hand that we're dealt with. If Othram comes in and says it's a 99.99999999998.9 match, well, what am I going to do with that? Other than pray to God that somewhere in Othram's paperwork, somebody made a mistake and I can attack the sloppiness, or somebody didn't dot an I and I could attack the sloppiness and pull on that thread, or hope that somewhere there's a chain of custody issue where I could say, well, ladies and gentlemen, how do we know that that sample wasn't compromised, that sample wasn't manipulated? Does it work with a company like Othram? Probably not. With another company, maybe. But as a defense attorney, again, I'm playing a hand, and sometimes it's simply a matter of, let me find one juror, just one. Let me hang the jury. Let me get a mistrial. Let one juror say, listen, I'm not punching this guy's ticket. And again, jurors are not supposed to know about punishment, but listen, we have a client to defend, and we are going to come as close as we can to crossing over that line. And sometimes we cross the line and we jump right back over. That's the nature of what we do, which is, listen, this is why defense attorneys are hated in the court of public opinion until it's your kid. It's your family member. It's you that now is accused. Now, all of a sudden, who are you going to call? And it ain't the Ghostbusters.
Randy, while I have you, I'm not going to pull up the comment, but Shirley Denister, when might this case go to court? I mean, I think she means trial. Assuming it does go to trial, what is your guesstimate for a time and a date?
It is a long, 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 long way off. There are mountains upon mountains upon mountains of discovery that have to be gone through. There's going to be motion after motion after motion. And it's not simply a matter of, out of the Trump playbook, delay, 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 delay. It's simply a matter of no defense attorney worth his or her salt is going to go to trial until every single possible plausible defense, every possible plausible tactic has been looked at, analyzed, exhausted, looked at again. Every potential angle for cross-examination has been looked at. Anything that can be done to zealously defend this man, because he is entitled to a defense the same way, again, your family member would be, like it or not. So do not be standing there outside of the courthouse looking for a trial anytime soon.
And I want to get to one more thing, then I got to let Randy and the rest of the guests go. But this is an interesting question here, Kristen, from Sally Vella, who's a friend of the show. Will there be, for protection of parents, DNA capture of newborns for future use, whether as victim or perpetrator or identification? Is there going to be a time in our world, in our lifetime, where they do start taking DNA samples of babies to track them in case they either become, like she says, victims or perpetrators? Will we ever see that, Kristen?
I don't think so. So that as technology advances and you get more and more markers, like I said, and you're able to get these really distant relationships like sixth cousins and seventh cousins, we're all related to some degree. From a certain area, there's only so many people that founded that area. And so you don't need everyone in a database. If you were looking at 20 markers like CODIS, you'd have to be yourself in the database to have that direct match. But because we're able to look at throw a much broader, wider net I guess is what I'm saying out there. You don't need everyone in a database to be able to identify everyone. And so as technology gets better, the need of having everyone in a database decreases. Right now, you have to opt in to law enforcement or perpetrator identification use. And if you go to DNA Solves, which is our database, we do nothing else. You don't get your cousin matches. You don't get back information about your eye color, what you look like. You're only helping law enforcement identify the next perpetrator or victim. That's why our database is mostly filled with people that are missing someone, or they've been affected with crime and they want to help make the community safer, right? It's a choice, and it's a choice that everyone will make. I think as more people know the benefits of being in those databases and the benefits that it brings to society, the more people will opt in or upload their DNA to the databases. But I never think we're going to go to a scenario like this.
Well said. This is a first. Something tells me it might not be 100% accurate, but I'll put it in our cap as a feather. Greetings from North Korea. I love this channel. From Tennis Rodman. I have a feeling North Korea, you cannot get STS out there, but maybe who knows? Maybe Kim Jong-un is a big fan. I had a haircut similar to his a few months ago. Maybe he got wind of that and allowed web service out there. So who knows? Maybe Tennis Rodman is watching. Definitely, this is happening. Amy Jansen is watching from Texas, home of Othram. Lisa Ribicoff, back to you. I was surprised to hear this. There's a report out today, according to the children of Rex Heuermann, whose lives have, quote unquote, been torn asunder. And there's been a GoFundMe set up by the daughter of another serial killer. They say that the lawyer says it's unfathomable. It's incredibly taxing. There's no apt descriptor that could be used to convey the 1 in a trillion situation that they find themselves in. They're doing the best anyone could, but it's still really difficult. But what's interesting is that they say they want to rebuild their Massapequa Park home. I don't know if you've been by the house, Lisa. My gut is telling me that you have. You've driven by because you're curious. But are you surprised that they are planning to rebuild that house and live in that community?
So I've heard a couple of different things. I've heard that the children want to go ahead and rebuild the house, considering the fact that this is their home. This is what they know. I've heard that the community and the encompassing neighborhood itself want to chip in and buy the house and level it and rebuild it. I've heard that that's the best way to put it. Sources have explained to me, and it's public, that the kids have retained counsel. The kids have retained counsel as a partner in the law firm that is actually representing Rex's wife in her matrimonial action. For the kids to go ahead and retain counsel and for speculation that's already out there, it's not going to surprise me if the children are going to file litigation against Suffolk County as well as any of the jurisdiction agencies that executed the search warrant due to the condition in which the search warrant was executed and the property and how it was left. But we, as the general public, need to keep in mind is that just because a search warrant was executed and they did what they had to do, they're in zero responsibility to clean up after themselves. They're there to go ahead and find the evidence, and they're there to go ahead and, I guess, match the list of documents that are on that warrant to which that they have to go ahead and try and secure. So I think that we just need to wait it out and see what happens pertaining to if litigation is filed. Maybe they want to take that money and rebuild the house. Or are they going to go ahead and use the money from the GoFundMe that was created? However, the description of the GoFundMe states that it's going to just go ahead and help them with expenses as well as possible medical bills as well as therapy for the family. But again, there's also some pushback regarding the GoFundMe, given the fact that even though he is an alleged serial killer, despite all the evidence that is going on, that there has been some outcry of why is his family being supported versus the victims' families. That like a GoFundMe was never set up for them earlier on during the investigations and when their remains were located and things like that. So why should we go ahead and facilitate and cooperate with a GoFundMe and possibly contribute for a situation like this?
Well put. Tracy Coleman, hi, love from Durban, South Africa. And I got to read this just because I don't get called a king every day. Hi, King Joel, your esteemed crew and STS soldiers. Adam Bluefire coming to us from Spain, I believe. And I hope my mom saw that comment. Someone called me a king, Mom. How about that? So, Randy, and then I promise we're going to start to wrap. But why is it important? Because I don't think people, including myself, fully understand for the children of Rex Heuermann. We know the wife has lawyered up, Asa Ellerip, and she's already filed for divorce. But why is it important for the children to now have an attorney on their side?
That's a tough one. If I were a cynic, I would say lawyers looking for a little PR, little media recognition, little time in the sun. I'm really hard pressed. The children are not targets. They're not subjects. No one's suggesting that they had anything to do with what their father is accused of having done. Now, there are many times where I will represent a client who's being inundated, getting trashed in social media, getting inundated, can't walk down the street without being accosted because they are a subject, meaning law enforcement is interested that they may have done something wrong, or they're a target, meaning you're about to get charged. In which case, yes, I will be retained to step in front of them. If you got a problem with them, you come to me. You want to talk to them, you come talk to me. But it doesn't seem like anyone is interested in talking to any of the kids from the standpoint of, we think you may have been involved, or you may have relevant evidence, or you may know something. If that in fact is the case, then they absolutely should lawyer up. But if it's just simply a matter of, listen, we don't want to be looked at when we're in the supermarket. We don't want people saying mean things about us on social media. We don't want people coming up to us on the street or driving past our house. I'm not really sure what a lawyer can do to stop that. It's not like you can get a restraining order. People can't drive past my house. And listen, First Amendment, people can't be prevented from saying mean things to you. Yes, if someone says, Randy Zellen, because my dad's charged that Randy is actually a suspect in Jane Doe 8, and that objectively can be proven to be true or false, then yeah, maybe I sue for defamation. But as I said, and I hate to sound cynical, but you have me on the show to call it the way I see it. That seems to me more like a media grab than an actual, I can do something good for you.
Interesting. And so is Lisa Ribicoff, who we're going to have back on. She is the manager of International Investigative Group. They have offices everywhere: New York, Westchester, Beverly Hills, Boca Raton, Florida, London. She's on the board of directors of the American Polygraph Association. Her dad is a stand-up guy. She's been on every TV set imaginable for every show: Fox's 5, Good Day New York, where I used to work, the Bill Cunningham Show, Dr. Oz, etc., etc. This question, to wrap it up, Lisa, from Adam Bluefire. Why do you think it took so long to catch this guy? Was he extremely careful in covering his tracks, or just so unsuspecting? He's about 6'6", as I like to say, in every direction, so he's tough to miss. But how did he slip under the radar? And your final thoughts, where we are with this story, Lisa.
The first thing that I'll address is, why do you think it took so long? I think it took, or I don't want to say I know, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, with the general consensus of the population right now from what we know about the case, is that had the jurisdictions gone ahead and actually created a functioning and effective task force 10 years ago, when the assistance that was offered was accepted, we would not be in the situation we are right now with as many victims as we have. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. We can definitely go another time for that type of episode. But again, it comes down to effective communication, willingness to put away egos and sides on the law enforcement side. And I'm not pointing fingers at any agencies or individuals, but there needs to be a cohesive unit. And I think now that there was a task force, that everyone put their egos aside and the jurisdictions were able to go ahead and collaborate and effectively work together, which is why he was deemed a suspect and he was arrested and charged. And again, allegedly, he is responsible for these crimes. However, it's up to the investigators to continue to develop their case. It's up to the continuation of work of, hopefully, fingers crossed, Othram doing God's work over there and getting these victims not only their names, but their purpose and sense of life, as well as their names back to their family members. Because it's not just about IDing the victims, it's about going ahead and giving that family the information that they need so they can go ahead and figure out how they're going to go ahead and proceed with the rest of their life.
Well said. Kay Angle, hello, been watching for a while from Utah. I love this. I hope this is not true, but STS Nation doesn't mess around. RIP Celine Dion. Let us know if that is in fact true. I know she has not been well, but hopefully that is not the case. So someone else said, I love Celine, same person. So let's hope that's not the case. If so, we are thinking of her, but that would be horrendous. Randy Zellen, he is a New York-based former prosecutor turned criminal defense attorney trying to find out if Celine Dion has left us. He's been doing it for more than 30 years. He's tried cases with the DOJ and the SEC. He's been on every show as a pundit imaginable. And you know why? Because the guy is smart and sharp as a razor. Randy, what is Rex Heuermann's defense team doing today?
Waiting, reviewing. I would love to sound intelligent, and I learn the longer I do this. Sometimes I can't say anything that is just so. I don't know. They may be working on other cases today. I don't know that there's anything that is necessarily earth-shattering that is going on at this very moment. That is the life of the case. There are highs and there are lows, and I'm moving on to something else today and working on a different case. So I wish I could tell you something that is earth-shattering and groundbreaking, but I don't know, probably just reviewing what they already have and whatever mountains of discovery that have already been turned over that they're starting to kind of dig into, figuring out the next breaking news and the next press conference, and making sure that nobody says anything that's going to be memorable for the wrong reasons. And by the way, I haven't found anything on Celine Dion, thankfully. But yeah, I can't tell you anything where you're going to be like, I got to have him back on, because that just was really cool.
I'm going to have you back. I'm going to have you back on no matter what. It used to be that I was taking your time up that made me nervous, but now those piles of paper behind you, they're giving me anxiety, Randy. I don't know how you go through all that paperwork. How do you do it?
It's one of those fake screens that you get from Zoom.
Let's hope that is the case. So I don't have to worry.
Hey, Joel, I'm so sorry, but I do need to jump off because I allocated a certain amount of time for this, and I realized that I didn't allocate enough because I've got a client actually here knocking on my door.
Have fun. Thank you so much. We're going to have you back soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Kristen and Randy. It was a pleasure meeting both of you virtually, and hopefully we'll connect offline.
We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye, no problem.
So Kristen Mittelman, she's the Chief Development Officer of Othram, Inc., a biometrics company that you just heard. They are changing the game of crime and how cases are solved using DNA sequencing. She received her Ph.D. in biochemistry and molecular biology from the Baylor College of Medicine. What's next for Othram, Kristen?
Disseminating the technology to others, making sure that everyone's using this type of testing right away so that people aren't getting away with a crime more than one time. It's a matter of time, whether it's a cold case and there's DNA left before it lands in our facility and another facility that will use this type of technology in the future and everyone's going to be identified. I think it's a matter of time. I think in our lifetime, there's not going to be unidentified remains. I think that's something of the past. People will get their names back and people will be able to at least start the investigation as to what happened to these victims. I think it's a matter of time if you committed a crime and it's somewhere out there with DNA before someone's knocking on your door. And I think that the future of crime fighting is going to incorporate this tool. I think it's the biggest thing that's happened in DNA technology since 30 years ago when STR testing started. And I am so excited to be a part of it. And we're not stopping here at Othram until everyone has their name back.
Awesome. And I do want to come out there. I will make that happen one way or another. I'll come out there with Steve Cohen, my right-hand man. Legal Mind friends, Karen Cole, you are amazing, Randy, as is Kristen. This was an amazing live stream. Huge thanks to everybody involved. Quick programming note, I'm going to give Randy some homework tomorrow night. We are doing the Black Widower case, 7 p.m. Eastern time. This is a guy who's 4 of his 6 wives, let alone just the thought of being married 6 times, but 4 of his 6 wives have wound up dead. He was convicted and actually sentenced to death in a trial about his 6th wife. But it turns out the Supreme Court, I believe, of Nevada overruled that, and they are now retrying him because they brought in bad evidence, quote unquote, bad evidence from a prior case that the Supreme Court of Nevada ruled was unfair. So now Thomas Randolph will be retried beginning today, and we're going to be covering this case. It is wild. 6 wives is a lot, and for 4 of them to end up dead is especially unnerving. So that's tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Great Scott, it's your True Crime Phil. We've got Detective Phil Waters and Scott Duffy coming in to talk about Brian Kohberger. Until then, love you, America. Love to you, New York City, Long Island, and Texas, the Woodlands in Texas. Hang on for one sec, everyone.